Hello and welcome to Radio Free America. So, someone in my TikTok comments asked me if I could do a long form YouTube video covering this new video from Insider, How North Korea Actually Works, Authorized Account Insider. This video just came out yesterday. It's got over 400,000 views already, and it's only going to grow from there. And of course, it's fake. It's propaganda. It's nonsense. There isn't really a reason for me to go through the entire 44 minutes of this video. I can safely inform you that it's propaganda and none of it should be believed. I was originally just going to make a quick little TikTok video explaining why, but I ended up looking into it a little bit and fell down a bit of a rabbit hole. So let me take you down this hole. So as you can see here in the description, this video features Hyunseung Lee. The entire video is just Mr. Lee here talking to the camera, and they intersperse some sources every once in a while to try to back up what he's saying. So what I'm going to do for you, instead of going through this video, I'm going to explain why Mr. Lee should not be believed and why the sources they use to try to back up his testimony are invalid. As you can see from the description here, it says that Mr. Lee now works as a consultant for the Global Peace Foundation in Washington, D.C. That should already be raising red flags for you. It's an NGO based in Washington, D.C. The U.S. loves to use NGOs that aren't really NGOs, based out of Washington, D.C. to manufacture consent against their enemies. And the Global Peace Foundation is kind of an interesting one, because they purport to be about global peace, obviously, as the name implies, but it seems to be just a front for Korean unification. They have this One Korea global campaign where they are advancing a movement for a free, prosperous, and unified Korea. Now, anytime one of these Western organizations talks about a unified Korea, what they're actually referring to is regime change of North Korea. They're referring to taking out the current leadership of North Korea and freeing the people, meaning wrapping them up into the capitalist hellscape that is South Korea. They say here that they promote international support for Korean-led peaceful unification, envisioning a free and unified Korea that is nuclear-free, hint hint, and upholds freedom, democratic values, the rule of law, and human rights as an urgent, not a distant goal based on the shared identity and cultural heritage of the Korean people. So again, they want denuclearize the North, obviously, because that's a threat to U.S. hegemony. And the freedom, democratic values, and rule of law they're referring to is just capitalism. That's what they say capitalism is, which obviously, as we know, that's bullshit. There's nothing democratic about capitalism. There's nothing free about capitalism, especially in South Korea. And listen, I don't even need to bring up the recent debacle in South Korea with martial law to prove that they aren't democratic, because even before that, they still weren't democratic. South Korea is an oligarchy. It's run by a few chaebols like Samsung. The people there work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And because of that, they have some of the highest suicide rates in the OECD. You can see this graph. Pretty steady rise until we hit, Lithuania, and then South Korea all the way up here. Now, the reason I call the Global Peace Foundation a front for Korean unification is because of who founded it, Hyun Jin-moon. Interestingly, he is the son of Sun Myung-moon, who's the founder of the Unification Church. The father of the founder of the Global Peace Foundation claims to be the Messiah and the second coming of Christ, but he's been rejected by both Jewish and Christian scholars. This video isn't about the Unification Church, and it doesn't really matter that much. It just shows that maybe the Global Peace Foundation is kind of a biased organization. Not only because of that, because the son of the Messiah has been involved in the campaign for Korean unification for a decade. Wikipedia here claims that the Moon family has pursued Korean unification for 3 generations. So his father tried to do it under the Unification Church by calling himself the next coming of God. And his son tried to do it by starting the Global Peace Foundation and other organizations. He founded Action for Korea United, which was a coalition that ended up launching the One Korea Global Campaign Committee to garner support for Korean unification through the medium of popular culture, especially K-pop. Now, again, I'm not necessarily claiming that that is the reason why Mr. Lee here, which this insider video is about, is biased. He just works as a consultant for the Global Peace Foundation. But let's look at where else Mr. Lee has worked. This is his author page on the news organization NK News. It says that he now works as a director for One Korean Network and obviously a fellow of North Korean Studies at the Global Peace Foundation. It also says he has interned with the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. The Foundation for Defense of Democracies is a Zionist organization based in, you guessed it, Washington, D.C. As Wikipedia states, FDD publishes research on foreign policy and security issues focusing on subjects such as nuclear non-proliferation, cyber threats, sanctions, illicit finance, and policy surrounding Israel, North Korea, Iran, Russia, and the war in Afghanistan. They are extremely Islamophobic and anti-Iran, obviously, since they're a Zionist organization. And yes, the star of this insider video worked for them. Now, how about the One Korea Network? Let's talk about them. This is from their website, the About Us page. Our mission at One Korea Network, we are committed to opposing the current structure in North Korea, particularly associated with the Kim family, and informing U.S. politics and media about the situation. Our organization is primarily based in, you guessed it, Washington, D.C., and plays a vital role in addressing the pressing issues of our time. They work closely with U.S. politicians, unsurprising. So yes, this One Korea Network outwardly purports to want regime change in North Korea, as I said. Now, just to give an example of what kind of politics the One Korea Network follows, take a look at this article from a few years ago about Syngman Rhee. They call him a giant who dealt with 5 U.S. presidents. If you don't know, Syngman Rhee was sent straight from Washington, D.C. to rule over South Korea with an iron fist. This was immediately after the U.S. divided the peninsula perfectly along the 38th parallel, splitting families apart. Mr. Rhee here immediately started slaughtering communists and communist sympathizers by the tens or hundreds of thousands, including at the Jeju Island Uprising and the Bodo League. He was a military dictator, and he slaughtered a lot of his own people. He was generally hated, even amongst most of the South Korean population. Let's see what One Korea says about him. They say, his misfortune was that his character was too great for society at that time. They cite a commander of the UN forces in Korea. These are some of the people who helped perpetrate these mass atrocities against South Koreans. They say that Clark described Rhee as an Asian, weird, and a strong leader. He added that Rhee had a strong army that was growing and that Rhee was not only an anti-communist leader, but also an anti-colonialist leader, which is news to many people, considering Rhee literally collaborated with Japanese imperialists. Rhee was actually a product of American colonialism. See, when the Korean peninsula was divided in half after the Japanese imperialists were kicked out, a new imperial power moved in. That was the U.S. Empire. They installed Syngman Rhee, straight from Washington, D.C., to, as I said, rule over the South with an iron fist. The One Korea Network is a far-right, conservative, anti-communist organization, and once again, Mr. Lee here, featured in this insider video, is their director. He runs the place. Oh, and by the way, the One Korea Network, they have some interesting entries on their partners page. The KCPAC, the Korean Conservative Political Action Conference, which is a partner of CPAC. You know CPAC.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are all domestic terrorists. Please welcome founder of...
Yeah, that CPAC. Here is another profile on Mr. Lee from the National Interest. It explains some other organizations that Mr. Lee has worked for, including taking on an advisory role at the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea. Again, I'm just going to show you their Wikipedia page. On it, it explains the members of the board of directors of the HRNK, which include, amongst others, Carl Gershman, the president of the National Endowment for Democracy. The NED is a regime change organization of the U.S. government. Both founders, including Carl Gershman, admit that it was created specifically to do overtly what the CIA used to do covertly. It's a CIA cutout. They've also got Samantha Power, who worked in the Obama administration and was a proponent of the 2011 military intervention in Libya. You know what happened there. It's got a co-sponsor of the 1991 Gulf War and an ambassador from the CIA. James R. Lilly was a CIA agent during 30 years in Asia who worked in Laos to undermine communist insurgency and who helped to insert a number of CIA agents into China. He was also part of Reagan's administration. Seems like a perfect organization for Mr. Lee here to work in. It's a far-right conservative organization connected to a bunch of US feds who love to warmonger. This profile also explains that Mr. Lee is a frequent contributor to media platforms like Voice of America, U.S. state media, Radio Free Asia, U.S. state media started by the CIA during the Cold War to propagandize about America's communist enemies, and NK News, which I showed before, and their consulting firm that runs them is funded by the U.S. State Department, of course. I went to Mr. Lee's Twitter and I found quite an interesting tweet from him that says, "I'm deeply honored to be recognized as one of Radio Free Asia's most compelling individuals of 2024. Yeah, Radio Free Asia features this man a lot, as that profile claims, and they also called him one of the most compelling people of 2024. I pulled up one of the Radio Free Asia articles that features Mr. Lee, and I wanted to show you an interesting excerpt from it. It talks about him trying to adapt to living in America after North Korea or whatever. And it says, in late April, he felt envious as he witnessed demonstrations materialize on Columbia's campus against Israel's military strikes on Gaza. The fact that the United States truly respects freedom of expression strikes a chord in my heart, he said. In North Korea or China, it's unimaginable to even think about such things. But when the protests turned violent and the demonstrators occupied buildings on the campus, he felt they had gone too far. This freedom of expression has gone beyond freedom and is causing discomfort to other students." Do you see what they do here? Again, this is Radio Free Asia, American state media, so of course, one of their main goals, aside from propagandizing about North Korea, one of the US's enemies, is propping up Israel, one of the US's puppet states. They will use a defector like this to defend the US's police crackdown on peaceful demonstrators on college campuses. Those crackdowns included, by the way, arresting hundreds or thousands of students for peacefully protesting and even shooting them in the face with rubber bullets. Apparently, though, the United States truly respects freedom of expression, according to this North Korean defector. So obviously, Mr. Lee here should not be trusted. He works for some very biased organizations. But, like I said before, this entire video is his testimony, but they try to back it up with some sources. So let's take a look at those at least. They have them listed at the end of the video here, and you can see the first one is literally from the CIA. The third one is from the U.S. Department of Justice. They cite the Transitional Justice Working Group, which, as you can see from their website, they are funded by the National Endowment for Democracy, which, again, is a regime change organization of the U.S. government, a CIA cutout. They cite 38 North, which, as you can see from their website, is a publication of the Stimson Center. You can pull up the funding and finances for the Stimson Center right on their website. And you'll see that they have some interesting funding, like from the government of Australia, North Korea's enemy, the government of Switzerland, North Korea's enemy, Lockheed Martin, a defense contractor, the government of Canada, North Korea's enemy, the Boeing Company, another defense contractor that recently executed 2 whistleblowers, the German government, North Korea's enemy, Global Affairs Canada, again, the Canadian government gave them $1 million. Microsoft, a capitalist megacorporation who benefits from capitalism being the dominant system in the world, gave them $271K. And of course, the U.S. Department of State gave them $200,000 to spread propaganda about their enemies. You know, we've got your standard fare Western capitalist media, BBC, British state media, CNN, absolutely manufactures consent against the enemies of capitalism. They straight up list the CIA again. Then you've got Crossing Borders. This one's interesting. Crossing Borders on their About page says they restore the broken lives of North Koreans through the love of Jesus Christ. Yes, they try to indoctrinate North Korean defectors into the love of Jesus Christ. Next up, we've got the Daily NK. The Daily NK is funded by, you guessed it, the National Endowment for Democracy. Again, a regime change organization of the U.S. government. It says they receive funding from the National Endowment for Democracy. If you go look at their press kit, they explain how they were started with a grant from the NED, and they couldn't exist without yearly money from the American taxpayer in the form of National Endowment for Democracy grants. I like to consider Daily NK the new Radio Free Asia because they are also directly connected to the US government, and just like Radio Free Asia, they exclusively use anonymous sources, and they are widely cited throughout Western media. You've got the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is basically the CIA of the military, the American government. You've got HRNK, again, I went over them, the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea, which is run by a bunch of feds. Oh, and there's another page of sources, and of course, Radio Free Asia is listed there. They also have the Wilson Center, which is a presidential memorial to one Woodrow Wilson. It's a governmental organization that spreads a lot of propaganda about America's enemies. So yeah, I think that should about sum it up. As with all Western media reports on North Korea, it is propaganda. It is fake. This man should not be trusted. And the sources they try to use to back up his testimony should not be trusted either. They all pretty much come straight from the US government. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to this channel and click the bell for notifications. And hopefully, I'll see you on the next one.